problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm lunching in the meantime, so I have
Yes.
my camera and microphone off when I'm not speaking because I just need to eat.
you're lunching. I thought you said launch.
Yeah, no, I meant lunch, like eating.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, now I get what you meant. So
Can I do a quick sound check?
Yeah, no problem.
In the previous recording, my voice was it sounded distant or fuzzy. So I want to make sure it sounds clear this time. Is it fine?
It sounds good.
Yeah, it's far better than the last time.
The last time, okay.
Yeah. Oh, so should we wait on you, Mr. Hoorn, or should we go ahead? I think
you can just go ahead and start because I'm just eating, and if I notice anything that I want to say, I'll just jump in.
Okay, then I will just start. I think.
And
yeah.
the other people, any other people coming?
Yeah, I don't think so because nobody notified. So I don't think that's gonna be the case, personally. But yeah, so I think we can go ahead then, right? Because I did say it's 5 o'clock and I notified everyone. They probably saw it like Dark Eliminator, but yeah, no problem. We can go ahead, I think. So yeah, that everyone. I'm just gonna start right off the bat. Like, I think everyone already read the book once. So for me, this time reading it through, I skimmed through it. I didn't read it actually. I went through actually what is really important to me, which is inspectional reading. I did skim like the start a bit, but I already know what Adler roughly says. But for me, this time around, it's much more important to apply the system. So practically implementing the system. So what I did is, I think I can go. Let me see to the table of contents. What I did was I went to these sections of. Let me see. I think it was. So I skipped over. Chapter 1. That's kind of, I kind of know what his thesis is to some degree. The levels of reading, I also skipped over that. Elementary reading, I kind of know what that is. So I read inspectional reading, I think, pretty not deeply, but like I did make some notes on that, so that I did do. And then the last chapter of part 1, which is how to be a demanding reader. I found it very fruitful in combination with inspectional reading because there were like sections on, for example, the questions you can ask when reading. That was really useful. Of course, how to make a book your own. That section as well is about marginalia and making notes, annotations. So that was also really interesting to me. I already was familiar with how he introduced that, but that was really interesting. And then I was just rereading this. So I might do that as well later on because I thought this was also interesting. It's like, I think it's on page 51, the 3 kinds of note making. And I'm really interested in that because I was already making notes and making annotations as we saw previously and as I showed previously. But I'm much more interested in the systematic approach of like making notes and knowing when to not make notes basically as well, because I have like the inclination to just make notes, but like sometimes it's better to not make notes. Like when it comes to inspectional reading, I think he said it on page 51. It's like, yeah, when you're reading inspectionally, it's like, yeah, you can make notes. That's not the purpose, but it is useful to record your thinking, basically, is what Adler said at page, let me see, page 51. And I have the habit of, even if it's a hard book, to just make note annotations long, but I sometimes feel like it's holding me back. So that's why the second part of inspectional reading, which is superficial reading, I think, I'm not doing at all. And I think that is quite useful if I were to introduce that. So that's kind of what I've been doing basically, because I already read the book once, but this time around I'm much more trying to look at what I can kind of integrate into my own kind of system and try to implement. So I've already also been thinking about that. But I'm curious about Me1, what was your name again? Sorry, I forgot. I have to ask again. I don't remember. Me1. I don't know. I don't remember what your name was.
was Ryu.
Yeah, Ryu, sorry. So, how have you been? Like, have you read it? And if you have not read it, it's no problem. But I think you've read it already once before. So, what have you been up
Yes,
to?
I've read it
Let's say.
before.
Yes.
Okay. Just to correct my thoughts, because I'm working at the same time, so I was mostly busy with work. But with regards to the book, yes, I have read it. And what I did when I was reading it was I was mainly trying to link the concepts discussed in that book. I was trying to link them with the things which Justin Sang talks about. Because when I'm trying to read how to read a book or any other book, I'm basically I'm reading them with a purpose, right? To link them to systems that I already know of. In this case,
Yeah, me too.
I wanted to see if any of the things which Adler talks about, if it's similar to the concepts which Justin discusses. And so I think analytical reading is a bit like analytical reading is a bit like the what can we say? It's a bit like the I'm trying to correct my thoughts now. It's a bit like the processing which Justin talks about, whereby you have to try to find relationships between concepts. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Justin Sang's work?
Yeah, I
Ahmed?
think. Yeah, not really though. So I think Matthew can jump in here because I think he's much more. I
Can
have no
jump in.
connection. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I have no real clue about like Justin's. I know some of his things, but I think I know he's lunching, um, but yeah, no problem. Like, so you have been trying to compare them, like how to read a book and
Yes.
Justin Sung's, because you're familiar and you're trying to use or you're using that system, and I think that makes a bunch of sense, by the way, because what I'm hearing from you is you're trying to practically implement the system as well, looking at what you already
Exactly.
use and making it more sense to your workflow, basically, and your methods.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. So I think we're on the same path.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the
And
same thing. Yeah.
and I know Matthew is trying to also
Yeah.
link how the concepts discussed in How to Read a Book with a cognitive load theory by John Sweller. So it's
Yeah.
similar to that, but I'm just trying to see. For example, I'm trying to understand how I can apply inspectional reading or analytical reading to making mind maps, for example,
Oh yeah.
because it's all about yeah. Because when you're reading a book,
Yeah.
I mean the way that Adler discusses it, it basically touches on how to process information. I think it's trying to teach us how to accurately process information which we read from books and to
Exactly,
get the most
and not
out
to
of
sleep, and not to sleep while reading. That's one point he
exactly.
makes.
Yeah.
Is to be active, not passive. Like
Yeah.
I think he kind of jokes
Exactly.
around about it. His style of writing
Yeah.
is very ironic. I kind of like it. It's very ironic.
It's very
It's like
yeah
yeah, you
and
know what I mean?
philosophical. Yeah.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
very
Yeah. I
ironic in a
understand.
sense. Like it's he's kind of joking around, but like he's kind of being serious
Yeah.
about it. So it's become kind of ironic. The part about like
Yeah.
sleeping, you know, that most people sleep while reading, and that
Yeah.
it's kind of a waste of time when you have dedicated, you know, a set amount of time to actually learn from the book, and then you go around. But the thing is that the people who sleep during sleep as a metaphor, of course, is like just not. You're just being like numb to the reading. You don't really process information. Basically, it's
Yeah.
your brain is not, you know, is not active. Basically, I think you
It's not
guys
actually.
know. Yeah, so you learning science guys know how that works much better than me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like yeah, I don't know what I was gonna say, but like basically that, yeah. So
Yeah. And
but oh yeah, I was
yeah.
gonna say
So it's
so I was reminded. Sorry, I will just make this before I forget it again. So
okay.
he said in the book, like, you cannot blame those people because those people don't know how to read a book effectively.
Exactly.
It's not like they want to
Yeah.
sleep. It's like they just don't know, have the methods. Like they have the intention to read a hard book, but they just don't know. So that's, I think, an important nuance to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. And That's such an interesting point that you bring up because it's the same thing with learning. I think a lot of problems in the learning space or in schools or education is that the learners and the teachers don't know. They haven't really been taught. Learners don't really know how to learn. They haven't been taught by anyone how to learn. The school just takes it as a job to teach them the material, but not really teach them how to learn the material.
Exactly.
And so,
I mean that's definitely true. But another part is also the mindset of students, because there's this concept that Dr. Justin Sung actually put me on, like he mentioned it somewhere, and it's called the misinterpreted effort hypothesis. I think that Dr. Zonke Arons in his book How to Take Smart Notes also mentions it, although not with that name, because Dr. Zonke Arons in his book How to Take Smart Notes, he basically says the one who does the effort does the learning. And that's basically the concept of the misinterpreted effort hypothesis. It is that students have a bias against methodologies that make them that make them invest effort and make them confused, while in reality it's often the methods that make you invest effort that are the best for learning.
I would add nuance to that, because I think some students take a lot of effort, but they
don't
the wrong kind of effort. So let me explain. So in his recent book, Carl Newport, like Slow Productivity, also introduced a term which I think is applicable here to my point, is pseudo productivity. People that kind of have an image of being productive, or an image of putting in effort. Basically, I can give a good example. Just what I observe. I think you guys know very well, but from my own experiences, like when we go to lectures, they take their laptop and they just start typing the whole, it's like the whole thing, and everything the lectures. It's a lot of effort. It's much more effort than what I'm doing, but it's the wrong kind of effort. So the effort here is this is the good kind of effort, where your brain is trying to think like, oh, what's going on? What are the important
their effort is basically postponing the learning, because they are basically offloading all the cognitive load to the paper by retyping everything the teacher is saying, which basically says, I don't want to learn right now. I want to learn it when I'm home. But that's basically a waste of time.
Yeah, but like, Matthew, do you agree that they have an image? Sorry, I turned my audio down, so I'm gonna talk right now. Okay, so don't you agree that they have this image of like pretending almost, they're not pretending because they're not trying to be like it, but they're almost showing this image of because they're typing the whole lecture. If you look at them all, they're learning. Yeah, they're doing great. You think, right? Like that's the image of. But then again, I think the effort where we're talking, I think that's the real effort, and it's the most important effort is here, is like in your brain.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the effort we're talking. I think.
I mean, like Dr. Justin Sung usually says, and what I often repeat to people is also like, what happens in the brain or in the mind determines the quality of both comprehension and retention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I think to our point of this, of our discussion, what Ryu just said is like, we don't learn how to learn, but we also don't learn how to read. And reading is an important aspect to learning, because our society is largely based on reading. Like reading is such an important books are such an important medium, right? So to the point of our discussion, I think learning how to read is also interesting and important. I think Matthew would agree, right? Yeah. So
learning how to read and learning how to learn. Yeah, that's true. And so I feel like Adler's How to Read a Book, basically, whether he intended it or not, his book is basically encouraging the message that we should put a lot of cognitive effort into our reading process. We should not just read the text to understand, but we should also try to question the author's intentions, the author's arguments, how it relates to other books we've read and stuff like that. So that's it. Yeah, I was just trying to draw that out, that kind of information, and compare to Justin's.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same line when it comes to. I think you, and I already said it in my piece at the start, is like, I think my purpose and our purpose, I don't know about Matthew, but I think he as well, because he said that, well, he's very acquainted with Adler and his system, of course. He didn't really apply it systematically. Am I correct or not?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, inspectional reading I've done the most often, but analytical reading, not yet.
Okay, so I think my goal and our goal is how can we, when also reading this book, is how can we together show our, systematically implement this in our lives and these methodologies to apply this. This is what I want out of this gathering, I think. So that's the goal. And I think because that's the goal, what is really fruitful as well is sometimes to actually take distance from the book, what we have learned, and then show our own systems on what we're trying to do and how we're trying to implement it. Because that's what I'm gonna do. I think if you're up for it, basically, and maybe you can do something similar. It's like I think when reading, I think it's much more interesting to kind of I've read this book already, right? So why am I reading another time? Am I just gonna read it? No, I really want to implement what is being said in the book. On to Matthew right now. Did you reread the book?
No.
Or did you just skim it like me, basically, and just check out a few little things, basically? What did you do?
Not yet, but I know the material. I think before the next session, I will speed read through it, but I didn't come to it.
No,
yet.
you don't. I think you can take my strategy is basically, you don't need to read it. You just take the pieces and the sections which you think are important, like I did, and read them more closely. But okay, so another question then is like, are you also wanting to implement this system more systematically? Because you know the material really well, but you have not, as you said, not been able to kind of...
I do want to systematically apply it, and I wanted to try analytical reading on the last book I read, but that book was so accessible, like I read it in a single day, that analytical reading was not really applicable to the book. But right now,
exactly.
Like the next book I'm going to read is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and I have a suspicion that I can try analytical reading on that one.
Yeah, for sure. It's a short book, by the way, so it's a quick read. But by making it an analytical read, you're gonna take more time and thus understand it more.
Yeah,
so
and also the writing style is older and less accessible, so that makes it more applicable.
It's not that hard. I think from what I read that book like 8 years ago or something. I don't remember, but like from what I remember, it was quite accessible. So it's not like the general kind of easy kind of book which nowadays gets printed and released. Like it's easy enough, I thought, but yeah. So yeah, what can we? So kind of introductions about that. Like, are there any things you want to bring up? Basically, like I don't know if anyone wants to bring up about because we're gonna basically for this call. It was all about part one of the book.
The first thing that I want to mention, because while I was eating, you mentioned superficial reading and saying it was useful. It would be useful to implement, and there's some nuance to it, because I think superficial reading can be beneficial, but like Adler says, it's mostly recommended for books that are a little bit beyond your current level of reading.
I'm talking about those books. I'm talking about like the Birth of Tragedy by Nietzsche. I'm talking about Horkheimer.
Yeah, then it's definitely valuable to superficially read.
I'm talking about Iphigenia of Tauris of Goethe. I'm talking about like these kinds of this is like basic for my course as well. So I'm talking about those kinds of texts, and I think that's definitely superficial. Beneficial.
Yeah.
I think Adler gave the example of Shakespeare, I think, in his book. So those are kind of on the same level. Nietzsche is like really not, very. The thing is, he writes so well, but he's also so difficult. Like it's really weird combination. Like it's not. It's like very, very odd.
Try reading Schopenhauer.
Yeah, that's also hard. Yeah.
Can you, just for the sake of the viewers who might not be familiar with superficial reading, can you just give a quick rundown of what it entails, superficial reading a book? Or reading a book superficially,
It's basically, when you, so the inspectional reading has two parts. First is like what Adler calls, you can give it different terms, but Adler calls it pre-reading, systematic skimming, and so forth. And so there are like a lot of techniques you can apply within that domain. The other part is when you have thus, and then I think the thing with superficial reading is you do first identify, is it a hard book? Is it beyond your skill level? And if it's beyond your skill level, you have to ask, if you're going to read Nietzsche, it would be kind of bizarre to make notes on a lot of stuff and trying to understand everything because it's so fucking hard. You won't understand it, right? So it's such a hard book. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably people. I don't know. Maybe not us, but I went into Nietzsche kind of not blank, but kind of blank, and I did kind of understand it a bit. But like the thing is that so when you have identified there's a hard book, it is this is superficial reading. Is like instead of trying to understand everything, just go ahead and read the book in one fell swoop. And the objective here is not to get lost in like little minutia
Detail.
things. Exactly, not get lost in detail and not kind of hug the trees, but instead trying to see the whole forest. Basically, by not
forest.
yeah, exactly, the whole forest, as in like having a sense of what the kind of bigger picture is. Because if a book is really hard, that's really hard to identify what the bigger picture is. Because if you get stuck at each little detail and you won't understand it by looking up, oh yeah, like going to reference work, going to Wikipedia, what is this, what is that? Go ahead and just read the whole book one through it. You won't comprehend a lot. Actually, you won't understand much. You will understand some things, but you will get a better understanding by doing it this way. You will be faster, and you will have a better overall sense of the book structure. And then what you can do, you can read it a second time and do an analytical reading, and then you can kind of go ham. But Matthew, you have to, Matthew has to kind of. Did you listen in? Was my explanation good about superficial reading and actually inspectional reading?
I think so. That superficial reading is a quite good explanation. The number one question that pops into my head, which I need to explore, and I think Ryu might be interested in that as well, is how does a superficial read compare to Justin Sung's method of pre-studying, which basically has the same purpose of trying to figure out the big picture, the 3 to 5 main concepts and their relations, like the logic layer, as he would call it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I've also thought about that. I think, just in my opinion, Justin Sung's pre-study, his pre-study is more aimed at not necessarily understanding the content, but trying to get or find concepts and ideas which you relate to. You're trying to use your existing cognitive schema in order to understand anything you can at all. So basically, finding things which stick out to you, right? This is Adler's superficial reading. It's more focused on trying to understand a little bit of the book before going into deeper detail or into a deeper dive. Yeah, it's like slightly different aims. Justin's is more on processes going on in your brain while you're trying to cover the contents of a chapter or book, while Adler's superficial reading is more focused on just getting a broader picture or a little bit of an understanding of the broader picture of a book. So yeah, they differ slightly in that goals. That's what I've been able to pick up.
Like
there's something else also.
Like you mean there is a nuanced distinction, but it's not a really big distinction.
Yeah, it's not a big distinction, but it's nuanced, and they achieve slightly different goals, I think Adler might actually have been touching on how to do efficient learning without even knowing it while he wrote this How to Read a Book. Because as you go deeper into it doesn't seem like that, because as you go deeper into the book, you start to realize that these methods or the types of reading that he suggests are very closely tied to learning, to types of different levels of learning, right? From the very basic and just understanding, right? The most basic type of learning that you can do is just understand or memorize. Then as you go higher, you can start to analyze, you can start to evaluate, you can start to synthesize. There's more advanced techniques which force you to engage more cognitive processes, right? And learn more. And Adler's techniques are also a bit like that. It starts with the most basic kind of reading, And then as you go up, you go from inspectional to analytical to syntopical. You have to do much more in order to understand the contents of the book. You do much more with that, and yeah, you can see the similarities. So he might have been right onto touching on learning processes. Yeah, without even knowing. But that's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mohammed, anything to add?
No, I think yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think maybe Matthew can.
I see.
Yeah, maybe Matthew
Yeah,
has
Matthew.
comments.
Yeah, not at the moment, but maybe later. I think Mohammed wanted to show off what he's been doing, his system building.
Yeah, I think before I'm going to do that, because what I'm doing is I'm basically collecting all my thoughts, all my ideas of creating a new system currently, and I have about a bunch of ideas. So I think I'm going to share that. I cannot really do a screen share;
Okay.
it's kind of hard. But I can do screen share because I have already some things. So okay, but like I'm gonna first introduce something. If you have the book at hand, go to page 51. I think, yeah, 51. I'm really fascinated by this because I think it's a really important page. And then also before page 51, there's like page 49 and page 50. Do you have it at hand?
Page 49 and page 50.
And page 51. I think it's primarily page 51, but we're gonna maybe reference back to page 49 and 50.
Okay.
Yeah, do you have? I mean, I don't know. Mr. Hoorn has it. I'm still waiting. I think he took it from the behind him somewhere. I think.
What? Yeah, I have the book.
Yeah, page 51 basically. But you maybe already make notes and are aware of what he's trying to the point Adler makes. But I think it's really not the point necessarily. But this is kind of system basically.
Oh, I really like the quote on page 49. I have really
which quote?
I say that a lot of times. Like
which quote?
Yeah, I will read it. It's like halfway through the page, something like that. But it says,
yes.
The person who says he knows what he thinks, but cannot express it, usually does not know what he thinks. I really love that quote.
I love it. Great quotes. Great quotes. I think, yeah, so let's go to 51 first. Because I think at page 51, so note making, basically it's all about note making, note taking. And I've shown my note taking system or annotation system or marginalia system on page 49 and 50. Talks about certain ways you can make notes in books, marginalia basically. And on page 51, he talks about kind of like the types of note making we can do. And for example, I think this is something I've not done, but this is kind of something I'm gonna try to implement basically. Is when doing inspectional reading, this is the first time I came across it, but when doing inspectional reading, it is, I think, the point what he's trying to make, I think it's paragraph 3 or something, or 4 on the page. I think it's 3. It's really about, like, what he says is really about not about like the specific points because he actually first says, like, when doing inspectional reading, you sometimes might not be even be able to make notes, but when you do, and it is actually useful to record your thoughts, of course, always, and then to be able to return to the book when you're going to do analytical reading, it's quite useful to have notes on the book. But when the types of notes you make when doing inspection, that's what I'm fascinated by. And he says basically it's about not the details and the minutiae, but about the general structure. And he calls it note making structural. Yeah. Any thoughts? Really interesting, because I've not been doing that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I also usually do not make notes while inspectional reading. This didn't occur to me before, so we might be able, or we might find it useful to discuss that indeed. But when I flip the page to page 52, I actually see a marginalia kind of note that I made a while ago. And it basically says, a Zettel custom contains mostly conceptual and dialectical notes. So that's why I found that interesting to mention as well.
Yeah, let's go to that later, because I think we can kind of go to page 52 after page 51.
Yeah.
And as we are at page 51, you can return back to page 49 and 50, because it's kind of relevant to this page as well, about marginalia, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So This is the first time I've like, oh, this is very interesting because the levels of note making. What kind of notes do you make at each stage, basically? What is the most useful note making? And I think the point he makes, and I've already explained what superficial reading is like how to make notes on the whole structure or on the structure of a book rather than the minutia. My problem is that I can get into minutia when reading, when I need to do an inspectional read. And I think Mr. Hoorn can, the type of notes I make in what I showed you previously, hypothesis and Zotero, it can get very minutia basically because you're going on to specific points, you're highlighting it, and then you're making relationships, which is always good basically, and you're tagging it.
Yeah.
But what can happen is you get too much into you can kind of get lost and lose the structure of the text you're trying to.
I think there are two different types of thinking that are both useful in different scenarios.
Yeah. So I don't know what do you think, View, about like this kind of, because I'm trying to kind of implement this system basically because I've not been doing it.
Okay. The type of note taking that right. But yeah, I can at least understand that point that there's different types of notes, and you use each at different at different moments. You don't have to always make detailed notes about everything.
Yeah, but I'm curious. So
even
sorry for interrupting.
You can go ahead. It's fine.
No. So I'll go after you. I think that was bad on my part. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, it's fine. I was gonna say that even in Zettelkasten, it's basically we also have different types of notes, right?
Yes.
While we make different types of notes while reading a book, there's the I'm forgetting the name now because it's been a while since I touched my Zettelkasten, but certain note you make, which basically just gives a short summary of what you just read. And there's other types of notes which basically try to onto the note, right? Because it links to some other note that you made before. So, and you don't always use one or the other. You choose depending on the situation. So that's kind of what this is reminding me of. If that's what you mean.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Right now, I'm writing some marginalia as I'm reading like page 51 and page 52. So basically, what didn't occur to me in the previous time I read this book, but basically, inspectional reading that takes structural notes, analytical reading makes conceptual notes, and syntopical reading makes dialectical notes, according to Adler. But he doesn't really go into what kind of notes are the structural notes. Yeah, he gives a descriptive explanation, but not a practical explanation. I want to know what type of notes are structural.
Yeah, and so I think this is the kind of project we're going on together, is what is being written here on page 51 and 52, because it's I think it kind of touches on the core of inspection reading and also the other reading things, is how can I, because, we're talking still about theory, but how can I kind of make this note-making structure when inspection reading, and also what Hoorn touched on when it comes to conceptual notes, and then dialectical notes when it comes to syntopical reading, like all of those. I will start with note-making structural, or like the structural notes Adler talked about, because that's our topic right now. But how would that look like? Does he, like I showed you previously how my system looks like currently, but how would I do that in my own system that I showed you previously? How would I make note-making structural notes when doing an inspectional read? Like, that's kind of still like not here, because I am of the opinion that even people in the Zettelkasten space, they talk about methods. Oh yeah, Sonke Arends as well. I think it's a good book, by the way. So I don't piss on it, but it's a good book. But the problem with that book, and I think particularly the discourse surrounding Zettelkasten, is that where are the practicalities? Where are the people in the trenches showing their system? I've learned most from Zettelkasten from Bob Dado because he exactly showed his system in the practical details. I want to see a person
Yeah.
who fights instead of a person who says he fights. Like a I can learn more
Yeah.
from a samurai who fights and uses his katana than a samurai who says he. I can learn from both. By the way, I can learn from a talking samurai that he gives teachings about his way of the sword. But I also learn from the way he uses his sword by just looking at him.
Yeah, I learned
Right?
most.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I learned
from
most
both.
from Scott Shepard because he is truly the masterpiece of practicality for me.
I think his public appearance and the things he showed on YouTube is very practical. So I like that for sure. But yeah, but like I want the practicality. I want to practically implement what's being said on this page, basically, and what I think
Yeah, if
Hoorn
I like
referred to.
what I think, I know I heard Adler and Van Doren talk about it in one of the dialogue style videos on this book. I don't remember which one exactly because I was searching for it recently. But I think they were saying that one should make an analytical table of contents for the book. But I'm not really sure if they wanted you to do that during inspectional or analytical reading.
That's analytical reading. What they mean, I know exactly what they mean because they said it on. Let me see where that is. So after finishing at page 50, I think, the last paragraph, I think, or the second last paragraph, they say that after finishing a book, go to the front end papers. So don't look at the page by page, the point by point,
Yeah.
which is done at the end of the book, which is then an index. And by the way, the Zettelkasten users use an index card instead of doing that method. But then make a basic outline, a whole, and then structurally outline the whole and its parts.
That's what they were talking about. I
Exactly.
missed it right here, but it's
on page 50.
Yeah, that's analytical reading, I think.
There's analytical reading, yes. I think page 49 and 50 don't necessarily. I know it's part 1 at part of an inspectional. It's not exactly. It's how to be a demanding reader, and I think
they are not limited to a single stage.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that the after finishing a book, you could say though that it could also be after inspectional reading. By the way, because you might have already had a good idea, and then after making your index, after maybe I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
I'm just.
I think what I'm right now thinking of is that such an analytical table of contents you could try to do it. After inspectional reading as preparation for when you go to analytical reading.
Yeah,
but you should keep in mind that the schema might not be the most accurate. It's mostly a prediction,
Exactly.
and then after analytical reading, you reiterate on it and make it better.
Exactly. I think that's exactly the point. Yeah, exactly. I think that's.
What do you think, Ryu?
So I kind of got a bit lost. What were you guys talking about again?
Yeah, Matthew can.
Yeah, so someone.
Yeah, no problem. We were kind of getting too far ahead because I know what I was talking about. So sorry. Oh. Yeah, Matthew can.
Yeah, we were basically talking about like the analytical table of contents and then into which stage it falls, like making one, either inspectional or analytical reading. And then after some discussion / reading, I was basically suggesting that after inspectional reading, you make like a premature analytical table of contents, a prediction as if it were, keeping in mind that it's not accurate. And it helps you when you go start analytical reading. And then after your analytical read, you reiterate on the table of contents, the one you made previously, and then make it more accurate based on your renewed understanding. That's, I think, the point.
Yeah,
that's also what Justin
it's
in his methodology. So explain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly. I think it should be effective because that's also what Justin suggests in I Can Study. He says that you should make a kind of hypothetical mind map.
Yeah.
Kind of a mind map.
I think we're losing you a bit.
Yeah,
I'm losing you.
You're crackling.
Yeah, so you have to kind of go back to
a vague idea or understanding of the concepts, and then.
So what did you say before? I think because we lost you for like 10 seconds or something. So.
A moment. Okay, so I was saying that if in I Can Study, it's recommended that we start with a kind of hypothetical mind map.
Yeah.
is based on a vague idea or understanding of the concepts, and then we can iterate and improve that mind map when we have a better understanding. So that's very similar to what Adler is suggesting here. It's a good idea, I think. But I think it might be less effective than a mind map because when you make a table of contents, you're basically just listing the broad topics of the book or of the book, but you're not really connecting them. I mean, you like as you would with a mind map. When you connect it, yeah, when you connect the different chapters and concepts, you're doing more cognitive effort, and I think that can help you with understanding more than just listing the topics or the kind of analytical table of content, right? Yeah.
What I would say is, I think I like Justin and all, but like I think he is very mind map centric, and I think that kind of I don't know
Okay.
about. Like, I personally I've not went into I Can Study course. I think mind mapping has insane benefits because it definitely when you look like the our we as human beings basically we can we're much more visual human beings and much more spatial basically. So I think I definitely get that point, but I think Danny Hedgeham recently made a good video on this, and he basically critiqued his mind mapping. I think I don't know if Matthew saw that video.
I have seen you send it to me, but I haven't watched it yet. I've been busy.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's very interesting.
I've seen it.
I'm gonna get into his course, and I'm probably gonna do mind mapping as well. I think, for example, for this kind of, I'm not gonna mind map everything. For me personally, I like what Adler has outlined here much more. Like, I think I'm not gonna go to mind map, and then you can do that. Like, I think that would work as well. But like, maybe it's scientifically better proven. Maybe Justin has something cooking up there. I don't know. But like for me, like I don't know, man. I will probably stick to what Adler. So I think different methodologies, and I think definitely, and also kind of I critique I think Justin a bit here, but like and he's much more knowledgeable on learning, and I'm not into that. So I'm a history student, so I cannot maybe. But still, from looking from the outside, it seems very mind map centric. So I might be wrong.
Yeah.
Like very mind map centric kind of learning, and I don't know about that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, so but the method that Adler suggests, I think it's a good method. It's a good idea. So starting with a kind of a vague table of contents and then improving it as your understanding improves. Yeah, that's good. Because what it does, it keeps you thinking about the whole book, like the bigger picture as you're reading, right? Because as you're reading and improving your understanding, then you're basically understanding the categories in which to divide the book better.
Yeah,
so I think it's a good practice. Yeah,
I have not a proposition. I'm gonna propose something. I think it'd be super interesting to try this out. What if we, after finishing read a book, but we have to kind of be committed to doing this to each other. I think is after doing this kind of how to read a book, and we have developed our systems. What if we take a book and then go through the different stages of inspectional reading, analytical reading, and then maybe syntopical will be a bit harder to do, so we might not be doing that. But let's say in inspectional and analytical, our systems are already set up and running basically, and then we can take a book together, and then we can do inspectional reading individually, and then we can share and then we can screen share because basically we probably have made notes digitally or physically or whatever. On how we did that inspectional reading, the kind of notes we took while doing inspectional reading, and then maybe after a few weeks we can return and then do an analytical reading, and then the kind of notes. I think that'd be very, because I've not done this kind of approach to a book, but I think by doing this kind of approach, first of all, we probably constantly develop our methods whilst doing so the system. Second of all, we probably have made a book our own in collective kind of sphere because we have went through these different stages, which is quite insane and intense. But I think it'd be interesting that, again, open kind of discussion. I think everything can go, but it might be an idea that we can try this out after finishing the book if we want to continue with the book club. We can kind of try something like this because I think it'd be super useful to do this. Let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm up for that.
Yeah, I like that idea. We'll be applying what.
Yeah, and basically it is part again book club. It's we're a book club, right? So we can take a different book, but instead of just a general and a normal book club, what we do is we actually try to apply this kind of systematic and systematic approach to understanding the book and sharing our systematic approaches to understanding the book. It's not just you need to read for this week and then do this. What we were going to say is like, hey, let's do an inspectional read. We have our system set up, and we then do an inspectional read, and we know exactly what it is because we have developed our understanding of how to do that, and we have set up our own systems. So the book club, will go on, but maybe we can kind of apply our teachings from this kind of from these sessions and the sessions to come, basically. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I talked too long about that, sorry. I don't know. Maybe I was like, but like, did I get the point across, basically? Yeah.
Yeah, you got the point, yeah. You got the point across, yeah. I agree with that idea.
Yeah. And so we can kind of, if there are any books that come to mind right now or will come to mind later, we can just, you can just share those and then we might do them, basically. It doesn't really matter what the book is. Maybe something we are interested in. We could do a very difficult book. Maybe that's fun. Like a very kind of classic book. It's very difficult. Is that a good idea to do? Because a simple book is a simple. Maybe it's more fun to really tackle a very difficult book.
You can only stretch. You can only learn when you stretch the limits of your mind, which requires something that is above your level. Yeah, I mean the real difficult book that I have in my shelf, aside from my neuroscience book, because we're not going to do that. It's more like a textbook. No, I mean I have a
classic, like a niche or something like that.
Yeah, I do have a like the most recent book that's more of a classic that I have on my library. That is the one I showed you. Obviously, that's Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams.
A boring book. Sorry, I'm not gonna read that. I have the book in my shelf as well. I've read it like 6 years ago. It's a good book, but like it's boring. It's a hard book though. Definitely, it definitely deserves like analytical. It definitely stretches your mind, but like, I
mention on the opposite side. I would like to start an easy book because I think if you can apply what you learn to something easy, you can work up to something harder. If we start with something hard, it might the difficulty we experience, we might not be able to really understand why we're struggling to implement what we learned. Because the book will be difficult and find the techniques for the first time on.
Yeah, it's the same point I recently made about mind mapping. It's cognitive overwhelm when you try to immediately learn the difficult technique of grind mapping on material that is also difficult that you don't know yet. It's basically overwhelmed because you need to focus on both the material and the technique.
Yeah. So what are you guys?
We can start maybe.
I think simple book. I think I'm convinced by Ryu. I think we should. I think I got too enthusiastic. I think a simple book makes more sense. Definitely when we just set up our system, and then after the simple book, we can delve into a harder book. I think that makes more sense.
But before we then move on to a harder book, we should actually collectively, like individually, but we share our thoughts. We should reflect on it using the COPS template I have, because then we see if we have difficulties with the techniques and in what areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like this idea because what we're trying to do, other than just reading the books, we're also trying to get our reading systems, refining them based upon these sessions we're doing, which then are trying to establish our reading systems. But then by doing books after that, we can kind of refine our reading. I think that's very interesting. Other than just understanding the book at hand, we're also trying to, and I think that's for me is a very nice. So we will definitely do that after. But we have to first read this book and then develop our.
I do have actually, I agree. I do have a suggestion for like right now.
Yes.
Which is
Yeah.
I like recently we were looking at my hypothesis notes. You know, when we were talking about the Haki slash Ultra Instinct note.
Yes.
What I actually suggest you do now, which I find interesting to see, maybe Rio also, is if you actually read the original article and see what your thoughts are, like make your own hypothesis notes, because I do think that article is something that interests you as well, because it's also about reading.
About for
Which-
you or for who are
Like
you?
right now,
Me or
Which
you?
article
Yeah.
is that?
it's an article by Jared Henderson on reading difficult books. It's called Gatekeeping Ourselves. And
But are you
Okay.
talking about me,
Yeah.
addressing it to me, or to you?
yeah, I think that if you, Muhammad, would share your screen
Oh, me,
and
okay,
read the
yeah.
original article and then make hypothesis notes, because I think it interests us as a topic, and I think you'll
What
find
is it about?
it
Because we were talking. Okay, so before going ahead, I think I want to still finish this. Is the structural note making versus conceptual note making versus dialectical note making that Adler outlines at page 50 and 51, and the kind of notes you take at each of those stages. I still want to address that, but we can do this first if you want. It really depends on us as a collective what we want to do. But what is that article about?
The
before we
article
go
is
there?
is basically about common issues which students face when presented with difficult material, and it's basically about reading in that sense. It's been a while since I read it, but yeah.
Well, what is the main kind of idea? Or like if you can...
That students basically gatekeep themselves. They fall into a self-fulfilling prophecy where they are told a book is too difficult for them, so they should start with something easy, while in fact the way to learn is to read something more difficult. Which is why I got reminded of you, because that was basically our discussion of like a minute ago.
So we should...
Okay.
Maybe again, that's what I'm saying. Maybe you should do difficult book. Okay, let me read it. I'm gonna screen share.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an interesting. Okay, now I get the
Yeah,
point.
it
Let
is.
me. Yeah.
Okay.
So I will just go to Matthew's hypothesis page and I will probably find it.
You should share. You should first share
Yeah.
your screen.
Yeah, I will.
Matthew's mother was waving. Was it your mother or?
Yeah, it was my mother. She just returned home.
I didn't see.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, but she is gone already. Like she just returned home. Yeah, we can see
He
your screen.
was like. Yeah.
You should watch the screen to real.
Yeah. Can you
Okay.
see my screen?
Yeah.
I was expecting it to pop up. Okay, but now I've clicked on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, that's the article.
Yes, I can see it.
How long is it?
It's not too
I will
long,
just,
but it's also not too short.
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna make hypothesis notes. By the way, I will just do it. Because this is more of an inspectional read for me. Like I'm just gonna skim it. Like normally I would never make. I would only make hypothesis notes when I'm like triggered. So I won't force that at all because, yeah, because it's how I do it. I don't always make notes on that. Again, to the point of inspectional reading, Matthew, is you're not gonna make hypothesis notes of everything. It's only when you have deemed it to be worthy of your note making and it's relevant enough for you, right? Is that not true?
Yeah.
Page 50, inspectional reading, it says like, I think Adler, I think this is also a good point. It's like one inspection, I'm like making the jump before reading this article, but like, one inspection reading, it's like, he says like, you may not have much time to make notes in it, he says. And you may not, so thus you may not make notes at all during inspectional reading, because I think there are also different stages. Sometimes inspection read takes like 2-3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or it can be. Sometimes it can take like an hour. So it really depends. And what he says is always limited to time, he says, and so does, but sometimes you might have important things and then you make notes. Well, okay, let me read the thing before going off track. Should I read this quote?
You can.
Or not? Should I skip it?
I mean, do what you usually do.
I don't know, we're just reading together, right? I'm not kind of individually.
Yeah, like I'm interested on your thoughts, like on the article itself. That's why I suggested it also.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm just kind of skimming through it to get the idea what the article's about. Gatekeeping. Okay, this is like the main idea of gatekeeping themselves. Okay. Gatekeeping. Yes, gatekeeping is kind of preventing yourself. Yes. Oh. That they aren't readers. Yes. Play-Doh is too difficult for beginners. Yeah, so more of a comprehensive theory of philosophy for beginners. Yeah. I read Plato. Sometimes these are high school students, sometimes college, who do not study philosophy. The message from Marty Smith, they were previously convinced that philosophy too, and reading Plato helped them see that they were wrong. Yes. Lesson I've taken is that we often prevent ourselves from doing what we like to do, what would be good for us to do. So we all books become something for a rarefied class, probably people with 2 PhDs and half this. Yes. Yes. Almost appreciative. I was always hungry for. I'm just skimming. I'm just scrolling. I don't know why you brought it up, by the way, this article, because it's kind of hard to kind of feed something here with each other, and then if you just said what the main idea was, I would have commented on that. But so the idea is like that. We shouldn't be like, oh, hard books, you don't get into them, you need to have a good understanding of the topic at hand first. You shouldn't gatekeep yourself, you should just, yeah, like, something about metrics as well. The whole bit. Yeah, so I think I got this general idea. I don't know. Matthew, can you comment, like...
Yeah. I kind of got the idea of the article. It's basically that students basically create this mindset or develop a mindset where
Yeah.
they avoid reading difficult books because they feel like it's too advanced for them. Rather stick with something easy. It becomes like a mindset that persists throughout their lives, and then they just end up always avoiding difficult books.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree that we shouldn't avoid difficult things. I think the points are a bit different though between what we were discussing and that. Because this one, I think it talks more about a mindset is prevalent, or what do you say? Yeah, which is prevalent in a lot of
yes, exactly. Society
and society nowadays.
Systematic. Yes.
Yeah. But what we were discussing more was we're not going to avoid the difficult books. We are going to tackle them.
Exactly.
But how we should approach it? Should we start with the difficult one?
Yeah.
Yeah, or start simple, understand what kind of system we're gonna be.
Yes.
Or how the system should work. and then use
Yeah.
that for the next, a more difficult book, and then a more
Agreed.
difficult book.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Ryu. After reading this article, I'm gonna stop screen sharing. So after reading that article, like nothing has changed. It talks more about society and about individuals, of course, within society. But I think we are all interested in reading hard books.
Yeah, definitely.
That's not the question, right? Like the question here is like what it makes more sense on our first read through. I think simple. Yeah, not simple generally, not like specifically simple books. So like what kind of book would kind of classify Ryu? Do you have an idea like what kind of books are? Again, for me, hard books are like much more like Nietzsche or something like that, right?
Like it must not be too simple that the techniques don't have any use.
Exactly.
So there must be like a Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, we need something that doesn't like make it too boring. I would argue as well.
Yeah.
You got well. It shouldn't be Nietzsche because Nietzsche is like here, right? Nietzsche is the hard category, of course. But we need something that is.
But it should also not be Jippe Janneke.
No, exactly. Yeah. So it shouldn't be like elementary kind of. Kind of like nice, yeah. So kind of childlike
for the sake of it.
Yeah, what do we do?
My idea of a simple book was just like something like Cognitive Load Theory by John Sweller. That for me is like it's a beginner friendly book because it's not too difficult. But we've read that one.
For example, this book would classify. This is not too hard, not too simple. I would agree. Matthew has read this book.
Yeah, I have it actually on my desk right now because I want to dive into it a little bit more for my own system of life organization that I'm busy with. I have the same edition.
Yeah, the exact same thing. But this book, Matthew would maybe agree. Are you familiar with this book? You yourself?
Yeah, I've read it.
Yeah,
I'm talking about Ryu.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I have not read it. I have it. I've downloaded it, but I've not read it yet.
But you're familiar
with it. So I don't know.
You've encountered it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've encountered it, and it talks about the flow, right? Flow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the godfather of flow, you could say, because he has coined the term.
Flow is actually one of the first books that I read non-linearly, like in a chapter order that I found more relevant. And some chapters I skipped back then.
Yeah, okay. But this book, I think, would classify as the Goldilocks zone because it's not too hard, but it's not too simple.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is kind of the book we're looking for, right? I'm not saying we should do this book, but this is another book which I think is the Goldilocks zone. This book is also this book talks about Wu Wei in ancient China, and it looks very conceptually similar to Flow, by the way. But this book is also not too hard, but not too simple. So I think this would also classify into.
But maybe we're getting like ahead of ourselves because we first want to finish reading how to read.
Yeah, no, but like I think it's just kind of but I think it's a good idea to kind of think about like what kind of book we should read. This kind of book, and then I think the book you propose as well is probably also the Goldilocks. So we're looking for. I think that's also So something similar that's not too simple, but not too hard. It's not like a Nietzsche or like a Plato or like something, or like those classical books or like El Ghazali. Like, we shouldn't be Western centric here.
You know, I have the perfect idea. Let's try to read Luhmann on education.
No. That's
no.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Joke, right?
I'm joking. Why? Also, even if we wanted to do it, like we then need to read 70 books because, like, scholars argue that to read Luhmann, you can start anywhere and nowhere at the same time because you need to understand all of his material to understand one of his books.
So, I think so we shouldn't be reading. I know it's a joke, but let's move on. I think we got the general idea. I think we resolved the thing. We just brought up. I think we can easily find a good book that is not too hard, not too simple. I already showed 2 examples. I think that would fit into that category.
Yeah, we'll
we'll
make suggestions later.
Yeah, exactly. Because
we can make suggestions.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking Scott Shepard's book also, but it seems like you guys have both read it, so.
What book are you talking about?
It's talking about Scott Shepard's book, Zatokasten.
Can I give you a tip?
Yeah.
about Zettelkasten. Bob Dado is gonna bring his book out in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. And this book, I've read his book. It will be out. I will send you the link. And I think it's a much better book than the Anti-Net Zettelkasten. Like, I think 10 times better because it's much more clear, much more practical. Yeah, it's much. So I think I would recommend to you. You can read Anti-Net Zettelkasten.
Yeah, I think I like Bob Dodo, but I know Muhammed Ali is like a big fan of Bob Dodo, and I'm like a big fan of Scott Shepherd. So there's a difference between us.
Okay, so but like, believe my word, and I swear to God, it is. Okay, so read Anti-Net Zettelkasten. You have it in your possession right now.
I do. Yeah.
Okay, you read the book. For me, it's a rating of like 2 out of 10 or like 1 out of 10. It's such a terrible book. I'm just my honest opinion, a fucking bad book.
I like it. I find
it's really,
okay.
It's badly written. I think Chris said it best. He was so negative about the book, but rightly so, right? I think Chris really like just lashed out. Not lashed out, but like he said it so nicely. It was really fun to see that. But yeah, it's a terrible book.
Yeah.
I really didn't like it. I like Scott. He really showed his system well, but the book wasn't just good. Like, I have like so many examples in mind, but it wasn't a good book. I'm not saying I'm a good writer, but like, if I'm gonna write a book, I would at least take the time to kind of revise the book over and over and over, or not even publish the book when I know it's just a terrible book. But yeah, that's me. Not to kind of. But Bob Dado, like, practically speaking, Bob Dado will, release his book in a few weeks. I will definitely send you the link. I think that book is going to help you 10 times more than his book, but also read his book because you already have it in possession.
Yeah.
But it can also help you with Zettelkasten if you want, like after the call or something. I don't know. Yeah, because I have a pretty good. Yeah, I have a pretty good system set up, so I can also help you. But I definitely recommend.
Yeah, but you do it digitally, and I prefer to do it analog. I don't know what
Yeah, exactly, analog. But it's not really hard. If I wanted to start analog Zettelkasten, I could do easily. So I know exactly the principles. The medium doesn't matter. Of course, it matters. But if you know how the Zettelkasten as a system works, you can use analog or digital. You just know how it works.
Your system was the closest to, your system was the closest, what I found digitally, to the original Lumanian method, physical. So.
Yeah, so that's kind of, it's all about the principles and methodology, and the medium does matter, for sure. That's why McLuhan said the medium is the message, if you're familiar with Marshall McLuhan. It definitely matters, but it's so the tools matter and the medium matters. If it's analog, Zettelkasten. If it's analog or digital. But the Scott Shepherd, the guy you're reading right now, he is so religious. He's like, analog is the best thing ever. Like, analog, fuck digital. He's like this kind of dude.
He's
fucking ridiculous.
He's kind of dogmatic, but it's part of his online social identity. I think he does it to stand out and to build an audience, a niche.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But I would say just read his book, and then also read Bob's book, and then make up your own mind. And I also help you a lot. Okay. Sorry for the tangent I went on, but I just had to kind of lash out on Scott because I think he is not a good force in the Zettelkasten scene. I think he did some good things, but I don't know, man. No, he just ain't it. Chris, for example, I think Chris is he's the opposite of Chris. Chris also has analog teachings. If you really want to learn about an analog Zettelkasten, go to Chris. The only thing about Chris is that he didn't quite has shown his practical systems, but I think once he does, man, oh my god,
we need to invite him to the book club, but he's not that available in terms of messages. I think he's either very busy or just not very online.
He does respond to my messages, so he does take 2-3 weeks sometimes to respond, but
but he has a he has a lot of publications, right?
Yeah,
on his website.
Do you know him?
Postlocal or something like that.
Do you
know him, Chris?
How do you know him? Basically, I'm curious.
I was basically really interested in Zettelkasten. So I was researching it almost obsessively. I went into the history of Zettelkasten.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I didn't implement it yet because I was just trying to understand it a bit more.
Yes.
So I researched Luhmann, I researched Luhmann's colleagues, I researched Luhmann's inspiration, where he got the idea from it, it from. So yeah, I really went deep into it, and then I ended up learning about Chris because he was one of the people who basically, I think he published something about
Yeah.
humans' original work. He was one of the original translators or something like that. So
Yeah, I
the
think
people who were translating, yeah, people were translating Luhmann's work, and then Chris came up somewhere there. His name came up. Then I researched that, and then I found his website, and then yeah, so that's how I found out about him.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I just really
Chris is great.
Chris like pieced out a lot of articles, like a cow's
Yeah.
bladder.
Yeah,
He does it like a cow empties his bladder.
I use that example of Mozart, who
Yeah.
does it that way. He doesn't do it that way, by the way, but I think he's pretty close to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to kind of get your mind around because he publishes a lot of different things also. So he publishes about, I think, some stuff about learning, some stuff about note taking.
Yeah, a lot
So
of
it's a
stuff.
lot.
He talks about morality, morality, about
Oral traditions,
media, communication, oral traditions, cybernetics. He's interested in. He has a background in math and so on, and engineering, biological engineering, something. He is very interdisciplinary. He can do a lot of stuff. Basically,
he's like a bit of a polymath.
Yeah.
Yeah, no joke. No joke. He's really impressive. Yeah, so I really look up to him.
He's the modern Renaissance man.
Yeah, I look up to him. I think we should move on because we kind of went on. I started tangent. I think you brought Scott up, but I had to kind of go off.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you wanted to dive into write the difference between structural, conceptual, and
let's get
dialectical notes.
Yeah, okay, we have to kind of reframe a bit right now. So I think, again, I think the objective of inspectional reading is creating some kind of structure and wrapping your head around. But Adler says at page 51, last paragraph, that when the author makes the ideas the author has, right? The ideas, the more specific kind of things. You will have an idea. The thing is, like, when you do inspectional reading, you won't be oblivious to it, right? You will have the general sense of what the ideas are that the author puts forward, right? Am I wrong or am I wrong? No, I'm right. But so Adler says. But when you do, but you shouldn't make too much judgments. Again, to the point we just made about the table of contents you make of a book. You do that also during inspectional reading. The problem is that it probably won't correspond exactly to the. It's a hypothesis you make of the book. Then you go to the analytical reading, and you reiterate. Same here. You have a general sense of the ideas of the authors that the author has, but you should withhold judgment a bit. You shouldn't immediately say, "Oh, this and this." You should withhold a judgment because the general questions that Adler outlined, I think, question 3 and 4 is about the truth of the book and the relevance of the book, right?
Yeah, and Adler,
yes.
Adler, like in the book on critical judgment, or in the chapter, I mean, he basically says before you or you should not say, "I understand." Wait, sorry, I need to think. He says, you should not say, "I agree, I disagree, or I suspend judgment," before you can say, to a reasonable degree, "I understand." So basically, you need to understand what the author is trying to say before you judge it. That's basically what he was trying to say in that chapter.
Yeah, and during inspectional reading, you will get some sense and insight into his ideas of the author. However, you can't reasonably say anything about the accuracy or the truth about the statement made in the book. That's what he says at page. I'm just paraphrasing here.
Mm-hmm.
Until you have read the book more carefully. More careful reading is analytical reading, obviously.
Yeah.
Then during analytical reading, that's what he says. It's also what I kind of made marginalia of. Is you will need to give answers to questions about the truth and significance. So the questions 3 and 4, because he has 4 questions you can ask a book. Are you familiar with those?
But the significance is not part of analytical reading. That's mostly part of syntopical reading.
Exactly, true. The significance comes mostly from but he does say that during analytical reading, you will need to give answers to questions about the truth and significance. That's what Adler says himself. You can read the sentence there. About the truth, it's of course both truth and significance. You can also talk about the significance of a book, but the significance becomes much more obvious during a syntopical reading. Or putting exactly, that's kind of the thing. The notes you make at this level of readings are therefore. So I want to talk about this detail. He talks about not structural but conceptual notes. So,
what's the difference there?
Yeah, but what I've explained also, I've done some paraphrasing about the point he makes, just up to this point.
Okay.
But what do you think? You know, like I'm just gonna go blank at you because I have an idea about like what the difference would be.
The difference between structural and constructural, or
So go
structural
to
and
page
conceptual.
51. Go to page 51. Go to the second last paragraph and the last paragraph. Inspectional reading,
Okay.
the notes he says are structural, whereas the last paragraph he says notes made during an analytical read are more conceptual. So I want to kind of get into the nuance of that a bit.
Yeah, I think the conceptual notes have more to do.
I think you should give Ryu. Sorry, I think Ryu was his turn, so I'm just gonna.
Sorry.
Sure.
No, not sorry. I mean Matthew needs to say sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Ryu.
I was looking for the part of the book. I have the digital copy, so when I went to page 51, I just found something completely different. I found,
you need to go. Sorry, you need to go to 3 kinds of note making.
Yeah, 3 kinds of note making, and then you said the last paragraph.
Yes, so it starts with in the course of an inspectional reading, especially of a long and difficult book. Yes. You have the paragraph.
Okay. Yeah, I see here something about. You may attain some insights into the author's ideas about his subject matter.
Yes.
Often, however, you will not, and you should put off making any judgment of the accuracy or truth of the statement until you have read the book more carefully. We'll give answers. Answer your own. Hey guys, can you still hear me? I'm not even sure. Mohammed, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I read it, and basically, structural is the difference between structural and conceptual is that structural is basically it's more like you're trying to organize the main topics of the book. You're trying to organize it into a way that makes sense. And then conceptual is you're trying to understand the actual content itself, right? You're trying to understand what the author is saying, or what is it that the author is talking about. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I personally think
Matthew?
that the conceptual notes are indeed about the substance matter, while the structural notes are more about to answer the question, what is the book about? It's about the frame, the organization. I know that at a later point, somewhere in the book, it's basically the rules of analytical reading, but Adler and Van Doren describe like that you need to be able to state the unity or the theme of the book in a few sentences at most, like as briefly as possible, and then secondly to show like the order in which the author goes into the topics and how that is related to the unity as a whole. So basically to enumerate the parts. I think that the structural notes have more to do with those 2 rules. And then the conceptual notes have more to do with the rest of the rules of analytical reading, which is to find out the propositions, arguments, etc.
Yeah, and also to this point is during an inspectional reading, going too much into detail and into the minutia, first of all, will prevent you from getting general idea. Again, go back to superficial reading point. And during an inspectional read, because you do inspectional reading, you cannot, with any kind of confidence, say anything about the accuracy or the truth of the author's point. So it doesn't make any sense to make a kind of note making specifically, because if you were to do that, it would make not much. You know, that's kind of
So the types of notes that you make during an inspectional reading are basically really short or how can I say it? Like they're not really notes made to understand the book. It's just notes to basically help you keep track of the organization of the book. Is that
Yeah,
that's the
but
idea
by,
that I'm
by
getting?
organizing the book, you get a better sense of the book as well. So I wouldn't say that it's not this. I wouldn't say it's by organizing the
Okay.
book and getting a good structure of the book, you will get a good idea about the book,
It's
but you won't get into the specific points and
yeah,
ideas
it's the
stated in the
frame.
book.
It's
That's
like
the thing.
how to think
The
about
frame.
the book. It's the frame
Exactly.
of the book. It's like the backbone structure in terms of mind
Yes.
mapping. What Dr. Justin Song is saying.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
they're not exactly the same, but they are similar enough to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that and does that help in your guys in your experience? Does that help?
I don't
Does
apply
that
the
help with
system yet.
anything?
Yeah. What do you mean?
Okay, so it helps him because no, I was just thinking back to an experience, right? I tried to implement inspectional reading while reading a
Yeah.
book. Um, I did it in I think 2 minutes. It didn't take that long, and I was not sure how it was supposed to help me. Um, I guess yeah, I was not sure how it was supposed to help because uh, again, going back to learning, when you're trying to learn and basically make mind maps, the reason why you're making why you're trying to get keywords from the chapter, and I think keywords are similar to that. Those short notes that you're doing while you're doing inspectional reading, a bit similar. But the main reason why you're doing that when you're learning and making a mind map is because you're preparing for something that you'll do later on, which is add details to the mind map and organize the information. With inspectional reading, not I didn't understand really why we have to do that. It doesn't really increase understanding that much because you're not going into the contents of the book.
So what
So
is your
yeah, I'm just a
question?
bit
So you're confused as to why we do what when it
why
comes
we
to inspectional reading.
should basically try to divide the book into different topics.
Into different
Basically get
the structure of the book.
basically create the structure of the book. Why we should do that?
So your question is why should we make a note making so why should we make a structure of the book in inspectional reading? That's your question, right?
Yeah, yeah. I want to understand the basically Adler's justification for doing that. I mean, I know he says that
I think
it's just to get
can I give a
yeah.
short answer? I think then Hoorn can give more of an extended because he probably has a good opinion on it. But my opinion is that the primary reason of inspectional reading is to decide if this is a book worth reading. It might also be an article. You can apply inspection reading everywhere, even inspectional listening. You could like a video or whatever. So
Okay.
inspection reading should help you to identify if this is something you want to even read. So it's a quick skimming helps, quick checking out, like in a few minutes, helps you to kind of decide this. Sometimes you're like, okay, but the second thing when it comes to inspection reading is like, okay, you can kind of decide if it's worth reading. It sometimes takes very short to kind of decide this. Sometimes it can take longer. But when you take more time, inspection reading again can take anywhere from like few minutes to like up an hour, like up until an hour. Is when you're not before going into the detail of a book on like each point and everything, the ideas within a book. It's useful to have like a framework to place them within, so you get a general idea of like the whole book, like the structure of the book. Basically, I think it's a general idea and the parts and the whole and the so
yeah, that's basically what Dr. Justin Sung is also saying. It's why you want a backbone to build the backbone of the mind map first, like the logic, the 3 to 5 main concepts and their interrelations, because it helps you to anchor the new knowledge to like the frame of thinking you have about the book. Without anchor points, the mind map and thus your understanding becomes quite messy. You need to have a logical understanding of like the broader picture of the book.
So I think whereas the topic of Justin Song is like a topic, you have like an exam coming up and the course material and everything. It's like a topic you're trying to delve into. With this, how to read a book, it's about how to read a book. So it's about a book, right? It might be book in conjunction with other books, just in topical reading. So you might have multiple books about a similar subject. But let's say it's one book. It's about making the mind map or the structure, quote unquote, the structural thing. That's also what you do with Justin Song, right? Before going too deep into the minutia, you go to make a general structure.
Yeah, a broad overview of the whole book. Yeah.
And of the topic with Justin Song is mind mapping. I don't know, so I'm just assuming this. I'm just saying something. You do the same thing with the book.
Okay.
Is that so, Matthew? Is that kind of what I'm saying? Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, I think so, because Dr. Justin Sung's methodology of learning, like non-linear learning, is basically based on the 4 layers of learning, as he likes to call it. Like you start with the logic layer, which is the 3 to 5 main ideas of the content and their interrelations. And then you dive into the concepts, after which you dive into the important details. And then you dive into the arbitrary details. Well, for us, there are no arbitrary details because we self-educate. Because he defines arbitrary details as details you can't really place in any framework. You don't know how they're related, but still they're coming on the test. Well, with self-education, you have no real tests. So basically, when we self-educate, we only have 3 layers, which is the important details, the concepts, and the logic layer. So that's basically it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, but is it more clear? Is it more clear as to why the inspectional reading, why you would make the structural outline, or just structural note taking on the book?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's more clear. So you're just doing it basically to decide whether or not you're gonna read the book, and also it helps to inspectional reading helps you to get a broad overview of the whole book.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to making the broad overview and the structural note taking we can do in inspectional reading is like once you probably have done that and once you have been again, inspectional reading is also limited by time, right? So you don't want to spend too much time. But if you have made this this kind of overview of the book just on your you don't have much time and you won't have much time. That's what inspectional reading is about. You probably already come to the conclusion that you maybe should read it. I don't know, I'm just assuming, but maybe because if you spend time on making a structure, you're probably going to read the book. I don't know, there's no assumption, right? I don't know. Is that true, yes or Matthew?
Yeah, exactly.
Has to comment? Matthew, yes or no? Because if you make a structural outline or you do structural note-taking...
Yeah, it's an investment that you only would do if you want to read a book. I think that's
But maybe you decide then, by doing so, that you're like, I actually don't want to read this. But you might return to the book in 3 months or something. But then you have a structural outline when you return to it. And you have good notes on the book, so you'll be refreshed. And then you will go into the book.
Yeah, then it starts mostly as a primer.
Analytically, it's much more effective probably then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this also clears up the comparison of the structural note-taking and conceptual note-taking that Adler talks about. Conceptual, he also talks about they concern the author's concepts and also your own. What about that, though? Why your own concepts? What does he mean with that? He says they concern the author's concepts and they also concern your own. This is the last sentence of 51. After this, we'll go to the comparison of conceptual and dialectic at page 52. But we're also almost done. And then we'll probably close up the meeting. And then we'll also decide what to do next. The next week. The last sentence.
Yeah, I don't really know what Adler specifically meant by that, but my own idea is that basically you are trying to relate the new knowledge you are learning by the author to the prior knowledge already in your mind, and that is your own concepts. I think that is what he's trying to say, but I have no way of being sure because it's not really comprehensive.
Yes, I think what you're saying is exactly right. This is also what Justin Song's main thesis is. It's like when you go into a difficult topic, try to, as much as possible, link it to prior knowledge, right?
Yeah, those are the anchor points, because knowledge needs other knowledge to stick to.
Exactly. For example, can I give an example? I think this is what Adler means. For example, I read this book right first, slow. Then I read this book, Trying Not to Try. For me, they consider the author's concepts and also your own. So I was using the concept of flow a lot when I was reading this book because he's talking about way and it looks very similar to flow. So I was linking it to the concept I had in my own mind, which was in the previous book I read, which the author did talk about, but he didn't talk about extensively, but he did talk about it. But I linked it also when I was reading. So the author's concept is about way primarily in ancient China, but I was also linking it to like flow. I was also linking it like to like divine mania, like in ancient Greece. So I can kind of link it like with the Zettelkasten, you link to a bunch of different concepts you have prior knowledge in, right? And I think this is what Adler means here. Is by so this the stage of conceptual reading, you can start to get into your own kind of connections you make and to your prior knowledge much more. Whereas in inspectional reading, you're just trying to get a sense of the book structurally. So you're not necessarily going to kind of connections. For example, Matthew, when we do like hypothesis or theorem, we definitely go conceptual, right? Because we're definitely making connections and talking about the concepts. But when it comes to videos, you don't necessarily need to. The inspectional reading is like just check the title, right, and maybe check the description, maybe check the comments, YouTube comments.
Yeah.
For example, that's for me is enough inspectional reading. Basically, I don't need to kind of. So then we make hypothesis notes, basically. But when it comes to a book, you want to just get a sense of the book as a structure, right? Basically, structural note taking. So, and then it probably makes more sense to get into conceptual and also the links you make in your brain. I think that is also dialectical, or that's dialectic, or
No,
we have to
dialectical.
get to the next page.
Dialectical notes are about the shape of the conversation. So that's basically the
Yes.
syntopical notes.
So he talks about page
Okay.
52.
That
I'm going.
makes sense.
Yes. Do you want to comment?
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, that makes sense. So dialectical is the shape of the conversation. Okay, that.
Yeah, let's go to page 52
yeah.
right now. So yeah.
Okay.
So there's the next page for you, I think.
So is it the page that says forming the habit of reading?
Yeah, before that. So there's an obvious it's that page, but it's not before that thing. So there's an
Before
obvious
that.
difference between structural and conceptual note making. What kind of
Okay,
notes
yeah,
do you make
yes.
when you are giving several books as topical reading?
Yeah.
When you're reading
Okay,
more
so
than one book on a single subject. Again, such notes will tend to be conceptual. He says basically, when you read syntopically, they will be much more conceptual. Why? Because you will be relating concepts from one book to the other, right, Matthew? Because if you're talking about structure, you're just talking about the structure of the book individually, not about like that's kind of weird, right? Inspectional reading talks much more about like a general sense of the book itself, right, Matthew?
Yeah.
Though inspectional reading is very useful in syntopical reading. I think he talks about that also in syntopical. He talks about inspectional reading and syntopical reading, but it's a different function.
Like
it's a different function, right?
Inspectional reading
Yeah?
in the syntopical reading methodology it's mostly used there to tighten out your bibliography. Like you might have a bibliography of, let's say, 100 books you want to read on a certain topic, and by inspectionally reading them all first before you read any of them analytically, you know which ones are actually worth reading to for your project.
Exactly. And the inspectional reading there, I think, is much more about, again, creating a bibliography and creating a list of things to read for a project in topical reading. But the inspectional reading itself still talks about the individual structure of the book.
Yeah.
And again, inspectional reading also gives you the insight if this is a good book or a bad book, or not a good book or bad book. I'm just talking about, like, is it worth your time, relevant to your reading and to your project when it comes to syntopical reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So that you're kind of making a future note there. But like again, so he talks about those notes being conceptual when it comes to syntopical. But then and the notes on a page may refer you not only to other pages in the book, but also to other pages in other books. So there's a stop even beyond that, however, and the truly expert reader can take it when he's reading several books syntopically. So this is also note-taking, right? We're talking about dialectical note-taking. That is to make notes about the shape of the discussion. Discussion that is engaged in by all of the authors, even if unbeknownst to them. For reasons that will become clear in part 4, we prefer to call such notes dialectical. Since they are made concerning several books, not just one, they often have to be made on a separate sheet or sheets of paper. Here, a structure of concepts is implied. An order of statements and questions about a single subject matter. We will return to this kind of note-making in chapter 20. My question, I think we all get the idea about dialectical note-making right now. Do we?
I mean, I do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, me as well. So I think it's quite obvious. It's
Yeah.
And I think Matthew touched about the marginalia he made, Zettelkasten notes.
Yeah.
But I think also hypothesis and Zotero, and by sometimes when I make annotations, I'm relating it to other things I've read.
And that's still conceptual.
Why? What's the difference here?
He is talking for dialectical notes. That's about the shape of discussion, the shape of the discussions that the authors have. Well, I am referring to the syntopicon itself, which is basically a product of a large syntopical reading, like the great books of the Western tradition. When I read the syntopicon, it's basically you have the 102 main ideas.
What is this? Who joined? I'm kind of confused.
I have no.
Oh, sorry.
What is that?
Yeah, no.
It was the YouTube started streaming.
No, it's like what I was talking about. Like in the Syntopicon, you have the 102 main IDs, and then there are 3,000 roughly topics. And the shape of the discussion about such an ID is like how the thoughts between authors differ based on the topics. It's like a questionnaire. I'm not sure how to explain it properly, but conceptual is more into the substance matter, while I think that the shape of the discussion notes is more meta-analytical. I think that's a better way to say it.
I have no clue what you're saying, Hannes. I have no.
Meta-analytical is like
what are we talking about?
Like, it's more like an analysis between the thoughts that authors have about different concepts, while conceptual notes is mostly about the substance matter itself and connecting concepts between authors. Do you get what I mean, Rio?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have an idea. So you're saying that meta-analysis, right, is about basically trying to understand what each author is thinking while they're writing about the topic. And then while conceptual is about just understanding the topic itself, right?
Yeah,
so meta-analysis is you're basically analyzing the author's thought or arguments, each author's arguments, and then trying to make sense of how it all fits together. Muhammad, do you understand?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, honestly.
If you give me 1 second, I'll try to see if Gemini can give me a better formulation.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Like I'm saying, like I'm not understanding it because I just really don't understand what like the difference would be. To be honest.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to.
I'm gonna ask you, why did you say that Zettelkasten is about like dialectical? Because Zettelkasten is also then conceptual, in my opinion.
Yeah,
how the fuck is it dialectical?
I said that Zettelkasten mostly contains conceptual and dialectical notes.
But how does Zettelkasten? If I just explain to you like my the annotation methodology I use, like how is that only conceptual?
Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to give Gemini.
And how is Zettelkasten? How does Zettelkasten contain like a dialectical? It can, of course, but like how does it? Is it structure notes? You can. Are you familiar, Hoorn, and were you familiar with structure notes or like hub notes? You can also call them. Maybe you can in structure notes make dialectical notes. I don't know. I'm just trying to think here. But why not as you're reading? Do you need to do that after reading? Like I'm confused. I just don't understand that. But that's maybe a good thing because this touches upon syntopical reading, right? So it's kind of difficult. And we might not be able to answer this and get our heads wrapped around it. But we can return to this. He also talks about this note making in chapter 20, he says, which is, I think, the syntopical part. Let me go to the table of contents very quickly.
Part 4 so I was talking about. But yeah, Gemini basically, I don't know if Gemini is correct, but let me just read what Gemini is saying. I gave him the book and my question, and Gemini is saying, the difference between conceptual and dialectical notes lies in the shape of the discussion they represent. Conceptual notes, these notes follow a straight line of discussion. The author is focused on explaining a concept and does not bring in opposing viewpoints or engage in a debate. Dialectical notes, these notes follow the shape of a dialogue or debate. the author presents different perspectives, arguments, and counter-arguments. The discussion is not linear, but involves back and forth movement as different viewpoints are considered. The shape of the discussion in dialectical notes is not a straight line, but rather a winding path with twists and turns as the author explores different facets of an issue and considers various perspectives. So what I think that a dialectical note, in that sense, is it is trying to take a topic and answer and a question perhaps, and it is researching amongst different readings. It's syntopical reading, so amongst different books, what certain authors are trying to say around that certain topic. It's mostly about viewpoints and arguments, while conceptual notes are mostly about the concept itself. It's focused on the substance matter. About it's more explanatory and descriptive.
I know what you mean. So it's about like it's about a conversation or discussion that authors have with each other, and the concepts or the ideas within the books of the authors themselves. That's the substance matter, but like it's much more about like this kind of subject and how each author tackles that kind of subject, and then bringing that into the note taking we talk about is like bringing that kind of together, right, and kind of getting a view on that basically. Is that like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you could basically try to say that conceptual or that's dialectical notes are more like doing research, synthesizing research, and presenting that. I think that's the closest analogy I can find to dialectical note taking. While conceptual note taking is more focusing down into a single aspect.
Yeah, but like what I said to you, but like about hypothesis /theory. What if you read a book, or like you read a book and then you make annotations and I index it. And what if I make in the annotations, I say like, oh yeah, look to this other book and look to this main discussion about this topic by indexing it, and I'm making annotations like this author tries to attack it from this perspective, but look also at the other authors that talk about it in this way.
Yeah, I think that would be dialectical note-taking.
Exactly.
I can be wrong, but I think that is.
Yeah. Maybe I have like an example even of that. I don't know. I'm not going to screenshot it right now, but I think if you make that within, the thing is like, I'm interested in the practicalities of this because you're talking about it on a conceptual level, of course, but I'm interested in like, and this is what we're doing is conceptual, by the way, right? We're on the concept. This is not structure. We're just thinking about the concepts within. This is substance matter, right? So this makes, so just make the concept clear once more. What is the practical way to make, I think structural notes, I have an idea, right? And I'm also going to focus on that first because that's part of inspectional reading mostly. But dialectical, I think you can make many ways dialectical notes. Like, again, Zettelkasten can also have dialectical notes, I agree. What I just told can also have dialectical notes, but when is it dialectical versus not? Like, it's kind of still fuzzy. But we'll get to that later, I think. Yeah, it's...
Yeah. If I could just add a point, is that I think, from my understanding, dialectical is basically when you start bringing in other viewpoints, right? Then the note is dialectical. It doesn't really matter how it's done.
Yes.
You can cite other authors. You can basically put two points about the same topic but from different authors. So you can do it in various ways. But the moment you're bringing up not necessarily opposing views, but views from other authors, then it's dialectical. And conceptual is just you're working with one author's viewpoint and trying to expand on that on your own, or trying to understand it on your own.
Yeah, and one important point. Yeah, great. I think that's a much easier distinction to make between conceptual and dialectical. I'm gonna bring up an important point. Adler says, is that since they are made concerning several books, not just one, they often have to be made on separate sheets of paper. And again, Hoorn, if you're listening, just the point I made is like when I read a book and I'm linking it to the other book and I'm saying like this author attacks it from a different perspective. The problem with that, it's not a problem, but if I don't pull that annotation into a separate note where I bring also the other authors, it just won't work as well. I think what you have to do with dialectical note-taking to make it really fruitful is to make a note where you bring different authors on each subject matter. You understand what I'm trying to say? Matthew, are you listening?
Yeah, I'm
talking to
listening,
you.
kind of.
No, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to explain something to you.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just explained it, man, dude. This is kind of annoying, man. Dude. Does it have to explain again? I think Ryu. Okay, Ryu can give a comment. I don't know, Ryu. Did you understand what I was trying to say?
Yeah, he said that you can basically make dialectical. If you want to make dialectical notes in Zero Custom, you basically have to include the name of the other author on a different paper. Well, not paper necessarily, but you have to include the name of the other author somewhere so that it makes on another note.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I
it
would just
makes
repeat
sense.
it to Mr. Hoorn because he wasn't listening. Are you listening right now?
Yeah, I'm listening right now.
Okay, so the point I was trying to make, again, I'm referring back to, I think, going back to what Ryu said about the distinction between dialectical and conceptual, I think, again, it's much more simpler to just say when it concerns more authors or more people. Conceptual kind of still sticks on to single books, I think, or talks about the ideas. Okay, I think it's like, even if it's about multiple books, if it's still about ideas, it's still conceptual. But when you say there are multiple people involved that look at this idea, that is, I think, dialectical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think it's a conversation between
I
people,
think that
whereas an
touches on the
idea
essence. Yeah.
are like, yes, I think that's a good distinction. So I think that works. But what I wanted to tell you, Mr. Horn, if you're listening,
Yeah, I am.
I don't know, you were looking away again, but you know what Adler says as well is that like when it concerns several books, when you know, he says basically if you want to make dialectical notes, you have to bring out separate sheets of paper and write it on that. And what I told you about like hypothesis and Zotero, the problem with that is that it's if you it's still on the single book or the single website or the single PDF or the journal article.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what Adler says is like since they are made concerning several books, not only one, they often have to be made on separate sheets of paper.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'm trying to say. So that is a hub node or structure node within the Zeto custom. I'm trying to think here. Or like a mind map where you just say this is the topic of let's say metacognition, and these are all the authors on this, and you pull the authors and the books. That becomes much. So the mind map, what Justice Song proposes, is also much more dialectical because you have like the different authors. Then you put on there.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just a single book,
for this and to understand dialectical notes, maybe not that much, but at least to understand syntactical reading, I think it might be worth looking into because they are free online. To look at how the syntopicon is composed, because that really helped me understand syntactical reading.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's something we can do. I think it's much more smarter to just go through the book first, and then maybe get to that. So let me just make a note on that. Syntopicon. Wait 1 second. Yeah. So, but did you get what I was trying to say, Matthew?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you did because you were not listening first. I don't know.
I think you were trying to say that it's maybe structure notes, but I'm thinking it could also be main notes.
Doesn't need to be. Yeah, so I think it can be both.
But
I think it can be
I
main
don't
notes
think
and structure notes.
it's not a bibliography note, at least.
No, so it goes beyond the bibliography. And what it does is it puts all these different bibliography notes on one note or on separate notes which you link together. Because that becomes a more of a conversation kind of. So Zeto Custom definitely can do this, but also Justin Song can do this with his mind mapping, where you say like this topic about metacognition. I've read these authors individually, but now I'm putting them together on one mind map, where I can scroll and zoom in infinitely, basically an infinite mind map. That's what those kind of software he uses, right? Infinite mind map software.
Yeah, he means like there's infinite space that you don't have.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what I'm talking. Infinite space with iPads. He uses those technology. He also makes. I find it quite weird. He makes the argument that paper is limited, paper is bad because you cannot do infinite zooming and scrolling. What do you think about that, Mr. Hoorn? Analog? Really
It depends on the type of notes you make. I think that for like for mind mapping, I get why paper is very annoying, because it is really difficult to make a correct mind map on paper, especially because it's an iterative process, mind mapping, at least in the way Dr. Justin Sung teaches it. But for Zettel custom notes, paper is just fine, and I would argue it's even better than digital, but that's my own philosophy.
Yeah, okay, then I'm joking. But I think what we got from here is dialectical can be done with like a Zettel custom method. The method that Justin Sung also proposes. So we have to delve deep into that, but it's quite hard to give it shape and form on like how that practically would look like. I think for us it's much more interesting to think about structural and conceptual for now.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to give that shape first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are there any last thing? Yes, what do you want to say?
Structural versus conceptual. Does this have to do with inspectional reading still, or are we now going to analytical reading?
So structural is more inspectional, because again we talked about inspectional. Yes, inspectional is much more about the shape and the structure of a book, like just general idea.
Yeah.
Whereas conceptual is much more about ideas and substance matter. It's much more analytical.
It's analytical. Also, it's like what in a space between the two, between inspectional and analytical, right? So we're shifting from one space to another. Okay.
Yeah, it's much more. Yeah. So I think I would say, but my question then is, can you not do conceptual note taking when doing inspectional read? Is that impossible to do?
I don't think it's impossible to do, because inspectional reading is actually divided into two other categories, right? In how to read a book. There's one which basically wants you to just get an idea of the book, so the title and the main topics and everything.
Yes.
And there's the other phase of inspectional reading, which basically you wanted to scheme. And I think during that scheme phase,
superficial reading,
conceptual, yeah.
I think
superficial reading. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between the first stage of inspection reading and second stage. I think you confuse skimming, which is much more first stage of inspection reading, with second stage, which is superficial reading.
Okay.
I think they kind of have overlap, but I think superficial reading is just more Hoorn. You have to correct me here, maybe. Is skimming is just reading a few pages here and there, basically, and just a few things here and there, and then maybe introduction or like conclusion, last few pages. Whereas superficial reading is reading through the whole book.
Yeah.
But without stopping too much, without minutia stopping and But you read through the whole book, right, Matthew?
Yeah.
But another question then, when it comes to superficial reading and systematic skimming or pre-reading. Pre-reading is like the first stage of inspection reading, I think. Second stage is superficial reading. Matthew, I think I will ask Matthew, because he knows probably better. But before superficial reading, you probably have to do pre-reading or skimming.
Yeah,
systematic skimming.
They are they are taught in that order for a reason.
Yes, but Adler did say, funnily enough, that the essence of inspectional reading is superficial reading. Somewhere he said that.
I don't remember.
This. Yeah, but it's kind of weird. I was kind of taken aback when he said that.
What did he say?
That the essence of inspectional reading is superficial reading, basically. It's kind of I
think it makes sense, because even if you try to apply inspectional reading, realize that skimming is not, or pre-reading, the way he describes it, is not always helpful. It can give you knowledge about the book structure, but it does not at all increase your understanding of the book, especially when you're dealing with a new book where the contents and where the contents are unfamiliar. Skimming does not really. Only superficial read actually helps you kind of get an idea of the book.
Okay.
You need to check out what I just sent in the general chat, Muhammad.
Go to page 43, and then the third paragraph. Finally, do not try to understand every word of a difficult book the first time through. This is the most important rule of all. It is the essence of inspectional reading. Do not be afraid to be or to seem to be superficial. He says it's the essence of inspectional reading. But I think it applies also to the first pre-reading and systematic skimming is also superficial to a
Yeah,
degree. So it
I
kind
don't
of
think he
applies-
is saying that superficial reading is more important than systematic skimming. He's basically just
It does seem like
he's
that.
saying
It seems like that.
he's saying the essence, the most important point is to not go into the details, but he's phrasing it a bit weird.
Yes. Matthew, what did you? I don't quite. Where did you post something? I don't quite
In the
get
general
what you
chat,
did.
I pinged you.
Yes, I think we have to close this book club. By the way, are there any lasting thoughts on this?
No, not necessarily. I just sent you a conversation I had with ChatGPT like a minute ago, which I think you
Yeah, I
might be
will look
interested into
later.
Yeah, sure.
Not right now. I think we have already done 2 hours, which I think is more than plenty. Really, do you have any departing thoughts? I will, before I will give you maybe your lasting thoughts, we will kind of decide on what to do for next week. So then we'll do that as a conclusion to this.
Okay.
Do you have any lasting
I
thoughts?
didn't really have. Not really. There were some things I wanted to discuss, but I think it would not align with basically the structure of this stream. I just wanted to discuss. I wanted to go a little bit deeper into reading itself and what happens in the mind while someone is reading, because I was very interested in that because I think that that level of
I think we can go into
That's
that,
the level of
but like
understanding.
next session, because it's more to do with analytical reading, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fine. Because I was more interested in like what's going on in the mind while you're reading. Because I understand. I did some on what happens in the human mind while we're processing information in general, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting. It kind of gives you insight into how something like ChatGPT works. It kind of gives you insight into that because they're based on the same or similar system called the vector embedding space. I wanted to understand what's going on in the mind while you're also reading what's happening in that vector embedding space. But it's fine, we'll discuss that another time.
Yes, yeah.
Muhammad,
So I think we can definitely go ahead. Like, what did you want?
Yeah, no, I was about to say, like, do you think we should read the entirety of part 2 for next week, or a few chapters of part 2?
Let me see. So I'm wondering because again, when reading this book, I'm much more interested in applying it in practical manner, right? What we could do, another option, instead of reading part 2, we can read part 2 in 2 weeks, so be done with part 2 in 2 weeks. But then focus on creating or trying to apply inspectional reading or part 1 into our own system and having a project of our own to train to kind of implement that or like create a set of things. Creating a system for that. Basically, we can also do that and then talk about that next week. And then the week after, we can talk about part 2 in its entirety. Now you have like 2 weeks to read part 2, which it's like 100 pages. I think that's doable, right? Again, because we have already read the book, you can just go to specific sections which we think is important. You don't need to read everything. So, what do you think, guys? I don't know. I'm just proposing something.
Yeah, I don't get entirely what you're proposing. I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, so we're going through the book, but like, so we want to implement inspectional reading, but like creating a system for our own. Basically, thinking more about how to implement this system. Because Adler did say a shit ton of things in part 1, and how can we implement that? Basically, and kind of thinking about that. And what you said is like, we can also do, and then just talking about that and showing that basically to each other. So the call for next week will basically be like what we did to kind of create a system around this, what we just talked about in part 1, and then showing that to each other.
Yeah, so you're
And
basically
the week
saying
after,
what you suggest is that we don't go into part 2 right now, but instead we try to read one book, potentially, doesn't matter which book,
no, I'm not saying
inspectionally, and then we share our inspectional reading thoughts.
No, I think because I have not created a system around inspectional reading. That's not what I said.
Okay.
I said think about how we can implement or create a system for inspectional reading.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, but you can do that
So
first individually and then collectively, basically, in next week. Yeah?
Also, we should just think about creating a system for inspectional reading.
Yeah, is it clear? I don't know if that's clear. For me, it's clear if I don't say it, but maybe I need to give more detail what I mean.
Okay.
Is it clear if
I
I'm
think we're
saying it?
confused. Yeah, it's clear. I think we're just confused between creating the system versus just thinking about creating a system. So we should just bring our thoughts next week, right? About a system for inspectional reading.
Yeah, but you can also create a system if you want. I'm gonna try and create a system for it because I have enough ideas and notes on it, and we have talked about it again. I got more ideas, so I have an idea on what I want to maybe do to create a system. So I'm probably gonna create a system for it, or try to gather my thoughts for a system. And then what we can do is next week, maybe I can show my system what I've come up with. We can share our systems, or we can share our thoughts about the system for inspection reading. So both, I would say, really, both what you said.
Okay.
Is possible. But if you only have thoughts, you don't need to create a system for it. But if you only have thoughts, that's also welcome. But trying to get more into the deep levels of it, I think that's more useful.
Yeah.
Or we can do 50 pages for analytical reading for next week, and then 50 pages. But I feel like we should just give it 2 weeks. Who's clapping? Like, I don't. Hoorn?
Yeah, I was trying something. I don't hear it.
I'm hearing it.
Oh, so you guys hear claps. I don't hear it. I was like, why doesn't this work? Because I don't hear it.
Okay, so and then in 2 weeks we can do an analytical reading in its entirety. It's 100 pages, but you have 2 weeks to read it. And then, so there are like two things. One thing is like working on an inspectional reading system for yourself, or thinking about doing that, and we'll talk about it next week, and showing that maybe to each other. And the week after, we'll do an analytical reading in its entirety.
Yes.
What do you think? I mean, you can say, I want to do 50 pages next week of analytical. You can give pushback. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm fine with it.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm also fine with that.
Yeah, but do you think it's fruitful to do that? I mean, I'm kind of curious because I think it's nicer this way, but that's me.
Yeah,
I'm thinking basically. Yeah, I mean, there are arguments for why it would be useful to do this. There are also arguments as to why we should wait with this until we have completed the entire book. Because I remember that in certain cognitive load theory articles, they suggest when you are trying to learn like a complicated procedural skill, you should do it in the reverse order. So instead of learning the first step first, you should learn the last step first. Why? Because then you have a much better idea what the information and knowledge you gain in the previous steps are being used for. So you have a better idea how to use it efficiently.
We have already read the book once, so we kind of have an overall idea of like all the steps involved. Some are not in detail, but like I think we all know what analytical reading is typically. We all have an idea. We've read the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't make for me. It would be very confusing to sub it in typical reading, to be honest. Don't you think? Or but what you're suggesting is waiting on reading the book first and then doing some topical reading and then going to
that's not what I'm saying. It's mostly due to learning, but I cannot really explain it in a short amount of time, and we should wrap up. So it's okay.
I think yes. What I suggested basically.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah. So let's
I also think.
Yeah. I think it's good. Or
yeah. Like, and I think then after the meeting, you should write an announcement to make it textual.
What do you mean?
Like you should make the announcement of in text, like what we should do for next week.
Yeah. So if the others, if they want to join.
Do you know immediately?
But if the others want to join, they can.
Yeah, for sure. But do you now mean after the meeting or like for next week? I don't get what you meant with. What do you mean?
Like you should, like usual, you should make the announcement like what we will do next week and when the next meeting will be.
Yeah, but that's kind of procedural, which I already do every time. Like, do you mean like I need to give something other information? I'm quite confused.
No, never mind.
So basically, what I already did. Yeah. We'll be fine. Yeah. So so for summary, we'll do next week inspectional reading again, and we'll create our system, and then the week after we'll do analytical reading.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good one. Yeah. So thanks for staying here for like I think we're a bit over 2 hours or like roughly 2 hours. So it's been a long one. I honestly thought after 30 minutes, I was like, it was kind of drying up the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It felt like that, but like now it's a bit. We kind of went overboard.
We
right?
went a bit
So,
into flow mode.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we did. Yeah.
Yeah, so nice.
It's very-
I will speak with you guys next week. Hopefully, you have like a good, better understanding of inspectional reading, your own system.
Yeah.
Would be great. So, yeah.
Okay,
You
later.
guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.